Welcome to this episode of the Live and Work Abroad show from Product Partnership, and my name is Product Sam, and we're here. I thought to start today in terms of looking at relocation tax for expats from the UK living and working abroad. I thought we'd start with a prayer. So let us pray. Dear God, oh dear Lord, save us. Save us from what's happening in the world at the moment. We previewed at the start of the year there's a lot of changes going to come about through elections, and they're proving quite momentous around the world. In Russia, and Venezuela, with the existing leaders, authoritarian leaders, getting massive revotes of popular support. In France, where it's effectively led to a change of government and style and personality, and also with the EU, as a big swing from the centre-left to the centre or even centre-right. So there's a lot of change going on in the world. We've seen a change of government going on in Bangladesh, riots over taxes in Kenya, unrest in many other countries as well. Not to mention the conflict going on in the Iran, Russia, Israel, Middle East, and Ukraine area. So it's a very upset world at the moment, and now it's come to the UK as well. But first of all, what is it with all the pose photos that are going on of Keir Starmer? Has anybody else noticed this? Every photo that comes out that you see in the press, it's like a pre-marketing pose that's done to show him being earnest, to being working, to being one of the boys on the building site, to be very studious, to being a family man. Everything is posed. Those of you who remember back, Tony Blair was accused of this with this option of, look up and point upwards, to show that you're winning and successful for the cameras. But with Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, they seem to have this whole portfolio of pre-taken poses to reflect what their mood is or what their intention is of the message that they want to put over to you. There must be a big library to last for the next 5 years, but please, let's have a bit of reality and humanity, and not just stage managed, PR managed, humdrum and hypocrisy. We're in a dangerous position in Britain, because the situation they've got there is that with a 40% of the vote, they've got an absolute majority, which allows them to work as a dictatorship in effect. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be autocratic and dictatorial, but already we've seen that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has suspended people from his party because they voted against his decision not to extend a child benefit for families with more than 2 children. Now, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I've got no view on. But to take that sort of a heavy-handed approach, on the first day about a decision, shows what the power that the government have got to implement the changes that they want to do. So I know we're in 2024 now, not 1984, but who knows, okay? When you've got a plan, if you've got a well-made plan for 5 years, with 5 years of PR photos in place and ready for each stage of your plan to execute, what do you want to do? Well, the first thing you need is an issue, to create an issue. Now, that could be the stabbing of a policeman or an army officer leaving his barracks. It could be attacking young girls for dancing not in Muslim dress. It could be for another type of racial attack. Those type of atrocities cause outrage, they cause response, and that then gives the opportunity for the government to crack down. And when you've got a potentially autocratic government with a vastly superior majority, they can create their new world order out of the confusion, the panic and the upset that is being caused in the mayhem of the atrocities. Now, whether they're being manufactured by outside parties or within the UK, who knows, but it's part of change that goes on, and I've got I fear that a sort of similar sort of thing is going to emerge in America as we get towards their presidential election at the year end, where they had a mini version of this at the end of the last presidential election, where there was some rioting and upset in the streets. I'm not saying this as a political opinion. I'm saying it's an observation that it's creating instability to justify big changes that are coming along. And as tax advisors, what we're looking at is the issue of what the potential of those tax changes could be. So with a government with a vast majority, with no effective opposition to that in the democratic process, then they can set the agenda for the world that they want to create going forward. And it could be a world where everyone is equal, with just some people, like the police, or some form of elite, are more equal than others, but that's to be seen. The next step that we're looking for as tax planners is the changes coming up in the 30th of October 24 budget that's been announced. But first of all, if you're going to raise taxes to change your agenda, then what you have to do is create an outrage or create an issue. So they created an issue by running an audit. Now that audit was entirely planned and it was always going to be done, and they've created a 20 billion black hole. It's not a black hole, it already existed. It was a spending pressure. The problem with the UK is they spent a lot of money on COVID and borrowed money and money they didn't have from an economy that went into recession, and it hasn't got the GDP growth that it would like. If an economy grows, if the GDP grows, then the total tax take coming in from that economy, so let's say it's 30%, the amount of cash for services rises. Now the 30% plus tax take, 30% of GDP for the whole economy, that's the average tax for every £100 earned by a business or individual in the UK. That has risen quite dramatically in the last 30 years as the UK has moved towards more expensive centralised services. And the only way to reduce that in the medium long term is to reduce the government borrowing, so they're not having to repay capital, they're not having to pay interest on the government borrowing, government debt, but also to grow the economy, because if the GDP rises and the tax take stays at 30%, they've still got more taxes to spend on more earnings. But we are human, we're all human, every one of us wants more pay, better services, more benefits, more of something for nothing. So there's always that demand, and the problem we have in a modern environment that we've got is there's a public service via a private service. So the private service generally produces the wealth, the public service generally spends it to provide the benefits for the greater community, the roads, the bridges, the buildings, the hospitals, all worthy things, but we have pressures. We have pressures because of the changing world, where the population has doubled over the last 10 years of the world, creating in part an immigrant crisis, but also we've got an aging population in the first world, in the European and America and Japan, and so you've got less economically active people to generate the wealth going forward. So we've got those issues there. All that the audit's done is taken a different political view to look at the total income and total expenses due for the UK economy and on the government, and by reallocating priorities in a $3 trillion budget, it's very easy to create a 20 billion black hole and market as that. And because you are managing your MPs and managing the information, your output from your government is PR-led, it's edited, censored before it comes out, but it's called censored or PR or media center, who cares? It's the same thing. Nobody speaks out of hand, nobody speaks out of turn, everybody says what is pre-prepared and preordained in the plan to move the world from where it is today to the new world order in 5 years. So this is a kind of situation that we've got. So by raising the issue of £20 billion debt, we can't afford to pay wages, we can't afford to have the hospitals. That creates an outrage situation where there's a response in the media, in the public, in public opinion, that allows a change of the rules to address the situation and take action to revise the world. Because the purpose of a centre-left Labour government is to go the way that they want, rather than a centre-right government, which would be more free market economy. So we're not here to comment on the political opinions. We're just saying is that it's a different world with a different government with a strong opportunity to dictate the change that it wants to make and force through its proposals over the next 5 years. And this is what we could see in the budget in October. If they're brave and want to implement their plan and have the maximum time over 5 years, they need to make the changes soon, and they need to make the changes in October 30 to give them the maximum 5-year period for the tax rises to go through, the results and the benefits and services to improve, and to help the political opinion to swing back in their favour, to allow them to be elected again in the next election in 5 years' time. So this is the big opportunity to make those changes, and those changes, I am absolutely certain from what I see in their planning that they've already been made and planned ahead. You have to remember as well that in the makeup of the government, the leaders of the Labour Party's government in the UK are staunchly Remainers, anti-Brexit people. So all those plans and movements of the last 10 years of electoral votes by Britain to become an independent trading nation, not part of the EU state, are under threat to be undermined and resolved back into the mix. So as well as seeing tax changes this year, we might see some more outrage on the immigration and travel fund as the Schengen zone and travel authorities start to kick in 2025. We'll cover more of that at another time. But for more information and guidance on relocation, travel visas, staying in tune with what you need, you can contact us at expatriates.com for expats living in the UK or relocating and living and working abroad. Expatriates.com. So let's have a look at the tax rises that can be increased. There's lots of little things that can be done. They're committed not to increase tax on working people. But again, that's vague enough in PR terms to be manipulated into other ways. So while you may not pay any more income tax, you could pay other penalties. So if you introduced increased tax on fuel, for example, because you want to be carbon free by 2030, then you could double petrol prices. You could the taxes on petrol and diesel. You could ban diesel. You could force people to buy more cars. You could increase the taxes to buy a petrol or diesel car way above that of an electric one, even though that might not be economically the most viable proposition for an individual, even though they may be a working individual. So those indirect taxes could quickly go up. There's a commitment that there's no change in VAT, but then again, it's not to say that there can't be other duties imposed on drinking alcohol and other duties that apply to various products and services that people consume in the UK market. The biggest likely change, though, is in capital gains tax. The reason why you would think this is because capital gains tax has been meddled with a lot over the last 20 years by Labour and Conservative governments consistently and without fail. The personal allowance for capital gains has been reduced massively, down to $3,000 a year, and some of the benefits and entitlements have been removed. Residential property capital gains tax has been increased massively as an attack on landlords to penalise them for making an investment and providing homes for people through those investments. And it's led to a different ranges of that. So with income tax, we've got 20, 40 and 45% rates. Now capital gains tax is paid at a different rate, whether you're a basic rate taxpayer or a higher rate taxpayer. So it's a very, very easy simplification to put the gain that you're making as an individual or into line with you as an income or capital gains taxpayer. So for example, if your earnings are £40,000, you're a basic rate taxpayer with a capital gain of 20,000. That means you're a high rate taxpayer on all your income. Could be very easy to do, and that would simplify the world. So instead of having a rate for investments and shares of 10 or 20%, or for residential property of 18 and 24, you could easily move it to the basic rate of tax, 20 or 40, and then you could even add into capital gains a potential for the 45% additional rate tax for very high earners over 125,000 a year. So it's a simple thing to do that could potentially raise a lot of income on cryptocurrency sales, on share sales, dividend portfolio sales, business sales, or any other investment that you've got, as well as residential property. Have in mind as well that inheritance tax is a form of capital gains tax, and it's charged on first death. So there's scope to simplify there as well. So why not there make the at the moment it's charged at a flat rate of 40%. Now with pensions already, a pension being left on death, a private pension on death, is already taxed at a rate of 45% on death. So it'd be very easy to switch inheritance tax onto a 45% rate, which is the highest income tax rate, so it clarifies that, and it then matches with the pensions, which are specifically taxed only on death. So that will make it a flat rate 45%. I'm not saying that they will do that, because you could also make inheritance tax subject to whatever the income tax rate is. So you could have a 20, 40 and 45% charge for that. So that's a way to increase the inheritance tax. They're unlikely to reduce the allowance for inheritance tax. It's not been increased for more than 10 years, so no reason to change that. But would they change the additional personal allowance relief? So when you gift your principal private residence, it gives you a bigger allowance to gift your estate to your next of kin on that principal private residence. So again, that could be abolished as a way of increasing tax, and limit the relief to 325. That would cost around about 60,000 per family that were benefiting on that, but it would only affect estates where there's more than 500,000 in the estate. Another area that would be very easy to tax would be to increase inheritance tax would be at the moment, and it always has been, on first death, inheritance tax can be deferred until the death of the spouse. So when you've got a partnership, a married couple in a civil relationship, that couple can defer on first death the personal inheritance tax allowance of 325 until the death of the partner, which is great for the family situation, but that doesn't happen with a pension. So when you've got a pension, the logic is, well, if the person receiving the pension is dead, then he doesn't need that income, so let's leave half to the widow. Good logic, good taxman logic. Not sure if you think that's fair, given that it's the money that you've saved up to provide for your family, but the taxman argues that he's giving you lots of tax relief to do that. So, but that is a decision on pensions, so why not follow the same principle that on first death the inheritance tax has to be paid? That stops a discrimination against a couple that aren't married or into the civil partnership. They have to pay inheritance tax on first death. So why not do that for married couples and civil partners as well? Increasing and bringing forward the inheritance tax bill for some members, for some people, to allow an increasing tax take over the next few years. Inheritance tax has been the fastest growing tax, as has capital gains, for a number of years, not least from the changes made in capital gains tax rules in 2015. So it's always been coming forward, and now, rather than leaving the old way and the old rates and the old allowances, by cracking down, it's allowing them to generate more taxes going forward. This is what Labour government that wants to spend money on goods and services and privatising industries, and paying people more to provide services to the taxpayer, that has to be paid from tax revenue, and capital gains tax is a rife area for that. Expats in the UK can potentially consider how they can protect their family capital and value assets from inheritance tax and capital gains taxes going forward. But taxes are rarely made retrospective. Now that doesn't mean absolutely that they won't be, but if you assume that before the 30th of October, no retrospective taxation will be applied, but they could make it enforced from the 1st of November, then those changes, if you're going to make them, you need to consider how you're going to organise your family and business assets and income to be tax effective by that date. If you want more information guidance on that, contact us at proactpartnership.com. Here's another thought. We already know that this government is committed to changing the approach of non-DOMs in the UK. Non-DOMs have got a right to only be taxed on their UK income, not their worldwide income, when they're tax resident in the UK. that's not a bad position. It's not an uncommon position around the world, and it's something that's existed in the UK for many decades. Now that's changing. A wealthy expat with business interests in India or Middle East or America must consider whether they want to base themselves in the UK to spend their money in the UK and to be taxed on the money that they spend in the UK and on the earnings that they get in the UK, whether they want to lose that for some people on the basis to try and gain tax on the worldwide income. And the idea when you change a rule is when you create that issue, yes, you'll create uncertainty. Yes, you'll create outrage and response. And the response for the non-DOMs is that if it's going to negatively affect your tax position, then you need to relocate from the UK. And that could have a negative impact on the UK in different ways. Not in the long term, because it won't see people changing for that. It just means that going forward, people will make different decisions on how it's going to work. So there's big significant changes coming in terms of the tax efficiency of being UK tax resident as opposed to non-residents abroad. Now, will the UK change the taxes for UK expats that are already living and working abroad? This is a big issue, because we know already that the tax in government service pensions on their worldwide income. So it doesn't matter where you are around the world, if you've got a UK government service pension, they want it to be taxed in the UK at source. So that's one position that you've got. Now that's not dissimilar to the situation you'll get if you're an American expat. You're not allowed to freely transport all your worldwide income and your tax payments abroad. There's a limit to what you can do in terms of transferring your tax resident. As again, it's an easy solution to say, oh, we're going to adopt the American system. And that would mean that they'll be able to tax UK expats around the world more efficiently, more effectively on their worldwide income, even though they're living and working abroad. Under a double taxation treaty, your tax residence can change, and the amount of tax you pay in each country can change, which is all good. And once you've done your tax return as a business or an individual, then the government settle up any balances in the tax between the two with the exchange of information. So it's just a matter of how that information is exchanged and who is doing the return as to what the right amount of tax will pay as people think. So the UK could try and adopt a system where more people are making tax returns and paying income in the UK, and that is being settled to the overseas tax authority, the balance that's due there. The important principle of a double taxation treaty is that you don't pay tax twice. What you do is you pay at the tax rate of the country where you're tax resident at the highest marginal rate. So if you're a tax resident in Dubai with a zero rate tax liability on dividends, or if you're a UK expat resident in Portugal with a zero UK income tax liability on your UK dividends, or if you're a Cyprus expat, a UK expat in Cyprus as a non-dom with a 0% tax on your dividends, a change of circumstance where that dividend was declarable in the UK would mean that you would go from that 0% tax rate to whatever the UK highest marginal rate is. And as we know, the dividend tax in the UK can be anything from over 80, from 8 to 37%. So again, the potential and scope there to increase taxes by just playing with the tax resident status between that. Now, we don't know anything on that at the moment, but we do know that the UK are committed to changing the non-dom status. But will they go further to attack expats who are already living and working and tax resident in another country. That will be a major and significant change. To protect your income and capital assets around the world, you can contact us at proactpartnership.com for help and advice and guidance on making the changes. Don't forget, when you're a tax resident somewhere, you may be the beneficial owner of the asset, but it doesn't mean that you have the tax liability. So if you're earning an income from a job you perform, then you're the beneficial owner of that income, and yes, you suffer income tax for that, okay? But if you own a property that's rented, then the property is taxed, but you have to bear in mind that you're the beneficial owner of that as well. If the earnings are through a company, the company will always pay the corporation tax. Now, the great thing about corporation tax at the moment, even though it's gone up in the last couple of years in the UK from 19 to up to 25%, it's still a flat rate tax. So if you're going to get attacked with higher marginal rates of tax, up to 45%, corporation tax, where you're going to get a maximum of 25% in the UK on a turnover over 250,000, is obviously going to be a more attractive proposition as a way of working. Now, the UK does happen to have is unique in having IR35 rules that stops that type of contract working in the UK. But for expats living and working abroad, it can work quite well. And although you may not want to pay additional tax, it could be better to pay a flat rate corporation tax than higher marginal rates of tax when you're living and working abroad. For more information and guidance on tax planning for contractors and personal service companies for UK expats living and working abroad, contact us at proactpartnership.com. Just going back to dividends and tax simplification. At the moment, dividends are taxed differently to income tax and capital gains tax. So we talked about simplifying the different rates of tax. So income tax is 20, 40, 45. So why not align everything to income tax? So you've got capital gains tax, which is 10, 18, 20, 24%, could be aligned. Why not with dividend tax as well? So at the moment, you've got a basic rate tax, 8.75%, then you've got it goes up to just over 33%, then over 37% for high rate tax and additional rate tax payers. Why not align those rates to be the same as the income tax rates? If you want to radically change your tax system, it's an option that can be sold as a simplification, and you can vote through with your massive majority if you're the new Chancellor looking to make a tax break forward for your business. And when you're taxing dividends, then you're not taxing working people. So again, it would seem to be an area rife for that. So while the argument is that dividends for basic rate taxpayers are lower because it's investments, it's additional capital that's going into the system, it's still income that some people have when they stop work or as part of their remuneration portfolio for their personal service company. So you need to consider that and be flexible to adapt your income strategy that you're applying to your business going forward. For more information and guidance on operating a personal service company from the UK, and if you're living and working abroad, contact us at proactpartnership.com. In 2025, the UK are planning to introduce worldwide electronic visa applications for people around the world. At the moment, it's generally just the Gulf states that require electronic travel authority to enter into the UK. this is, in addition, it doesn't matter whether it's visa, if you've got visa-free travel, you need to have the Electronic Travel Authority applied for, approved online before you travel to the UK. They call it a travel authority, but effectively it's exactly the same as electronic. It's just electronic visa approved online, matching up all your data online with secure photo recognition from the photographs and IDs that it takes. So they've always got that that's coming in for everyone that travels into the UK from 2025. Now the EU have long had a plan to do exactly the same, but as usual with the EU, everything takes a bit longer, and it was put off from being implemented in 23 and 24, not least because of the Olympic Games and the Euros, and the difficulty in actually getting any form of travel into the UK, into the EU, from when you haven't got visa-free travel. The EU is quite difficult, and they require you at the moment to get those travel authorities, those travel visas, by personal visit, and it can't be done online, and that is something is stress for the whole of the EU Schengen system, and they're looking to update that and bring it online. Irrespective of that, from 2025, the EU are planning to introduce electronic travel authorities for everybody who's got visa-free travel into the EU. So for all UK expats and any other country that's got visa-free travel into the EU, you will need this electronic travel authority approved for and issued by the EU, not a particular country or state, by the EU to do that. That will overcome certain things. It won't necessarily overcome the 90 and 180-day Schengen rule. For that you need a visitor's visa or a resident permit for the country that or countries that you want to stay in. But by requiring the travel authorities, it's going to vet you for that 90 and 180 days. And basically they've got the information already. The travel authority, the electronic travel authority, will be able to vet you when you're going into the country and when you're leaving again. Now this is significant. So if you've got a villa in Portugal or Spain or France, technically at the moment, under Schengen rules, you're only allowed to visit that for 3 months a year, every 3 months in 6 months of each year. So you could spend up to 6 months a year there, but only in two breaks, in the first 6 months and the second 6 months. And the dates of travel logged into the travel authority system will enable them to enforce that, but also to apply the Schengen zone rules to non-EU members and non-Schengen zone members. Now, the Schengen zone is effectively the EU, but it also includes EEA members, Norway, Iceland, as well as Switzerland. So those countries, the citizens of those countries don't have Schengen zone restrictions when they travel into the EU. At the moment, the UK citizens do. Irish are not proposing to go into the Schengen zone, but because they're EU citizens, they've still got that freedom of movement, so they're not restricted by the Schengen zone restrictions, but a UK citizen at the moment will. So there's a number of different approaches you could take, depending on what your plans are and how much time you want to spend in Europe in 2025. So if you've got overseas property, you can take action now with your Cyprus, Spanish or Portuguese property or French property to consider how you could get a resident permit or visitor's visa to allow you to travel and without the Schengen zone restrictions. So that will be the first consideration. You can have a resident permit for a country without having a a tax residency. The tax residency comes if you spend more than 6 months in that country. So unless you spend more than 6 months in the country, you're not tax resident. If you spend more than 6 months in Spain, you're automatically tax resident, need to do a tax return. Same with Cyprus, same with Portugal, and any other country around the world, in effect. The paradox, and the opposite is true, by the way. If as a UK expat you don't spend more than 6 months and be a tax resident in another country, and you spend more time in the UK, even though it's only a few months than any other country in the world, you will still be tax resident in the UK. So you can't make up the rules, you can only follow your rules and apply them to your circumstance in the best way that suits you. So to plan ahead, you can look forward to see if you've got an overseas property, do you need to organise and get yourself on a resident permit before the rules come into force in 2025? Would an annual visitor's visa, would that work for you? And that application process work for you? That's another consideration. Or the other option might be that you just abandon your plans to travel to those other countries. There's a fourth alternative that might come up, and again, the conversation's already come up. We talked earlier about how a Labour government with a dictatorial majority can effectively apply autocratic changes. So while the UK electorate, effectively over 10 years, has voted for Brexit and not to be part of the EU system, it'd be very easy for the current government to create an issue around travel restrictions and access to family reunions and overseas assets in the EU because of the Schengen zone rules. It'd be very easy for the UK to come along and revise the procedures, to change the rules, to put the UK in, if not in the EEA, in alignment with the EU, like Switzerland agreement is, so that the border controls are removed, and a UK citizen, although the UK is not in the EU, is part of the Schengen zone. So that's something that would come in as well, and that would be very easy for them to adjust that over the next year, given that the UK is already in the process of introducing a very similar piece of technology to it for the electronic travel authorities in the UK. Again, these are things that could change in the future, so you can plan ahead with an uncertain time over the next few months. For more information and guidance on relocating overseas, travel authorities and the requirements you need to have unrestricted access to family and overseas property in the EU, contact us at proactpartnership.com. So we talked quite a lot today to identify how a PR operation can create an issue, create a controversy, an outrage, and that leads to an agenda for change that can look very different, and that could lead to crackdowns and rule changes to change the new world order. We in the UK have got a government that's got this substantial majority to allow it to be autocratic, dictate to its own party to follow its plan with discipline to change the view and the way that the UK operates, which could affect residency rules and tax residency rules for expats living in the UK and expats living and working abroad. So big changes coming up. If you want to consider changes to your assets and income and business arrangements for your personal service company as a UK expat and put them in place in anticipation of the budget, or as a consequence of the budget in October 24, you can contact us at proactpartnership.com. Thanks a lot for listening, and join us again next week to stay in touch with the changes in the world that's going on in this world of 2024. Thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you again next time.